When I was in federal prison, I formed a quasi-friendship with a long-term prisoner. He'd been in 11 years on a 17-year federal prison sentence. We met while we were working in the kitchen together. And you may be thinking, Justin, why would someone who's been in prison for 11 years, who could have any job he wants, be working in the kitchen? I will tell you. Nate was his name, was a long-distance runner. And I will tell you, as a runner, there are benefits that follow working in the kitchen. You get a lot of extra food. So while working in the kitchen, we would strike up some conversations. He saw that I was trying to become a long-distance runner, and he would offer me some insights and advice, and we just kind of struck up a friendship. A few days a week, we would meet at the track, and we would walk a couple of laps together before we went off for our respective runs. He ran much longer and much faster than I did. During these runs, I listened, and he shared some things that were very insightful, sad to hear. I profile or share some of them in Lessons from Prison, a book you can still get for free at White Collar Advice. He liked to say long-term prisoners should forget about the outside world while serving time. Let your family serve their time. You serve your time. I couldn't relate to that. I was in for a measly year. As soon as I went in, I was getting processed out. But he had a different perspective. He shut out the family. It was too hard to see what was taking place in the outside world. He just couldn't endure it. What about Elizabeth Holmes? She's got an 11-year prison sentence upcoming. Should she forget about the outside world, or should she nurture? What about Sam Bankman-Fried? If convicted, he's going to get 2, 3, 4 decades potentially in federal prison. How should he nurture, or should he forget about the outside world? While walking that dusty dirt track in federal prison, he used to quote Epictetus, and he would say, "It is impossible for a person to learn what he thinks he already knows." I'm like, well, help me understand why you're giving me that quote. And he's like, as a younger person, as I was going to trial, I thought I knew everything, and I had deceived and convinced myself that I knew everything and I couldn't be taught or educated. And I had convinced myself that there was really no difference between getting sentenced to 7 or 8 years, which is what he would have received had he pled guilty, and 17 years, which is what he received by going to trial and getting convicted. To me, they were the same because one day in prison felt too long. But now every day after 7 years that I would have been home had I pled guilty, I walk around this dusty dirt track and I tell myself, had I done the right thing and not deceived myself, I'd be home. But instead, I'll be here for many, many more years. I would argue that Elizabeth Holmes, Sam Bankman-Fried fall into that same class of thinking that they know absolutely everything and having enablers or yes people around them who tell them what they want to hear, perhaps because they don't understand the stakeholders, like a defense attorney who is doing their job but has an agenda to bill and take this towards to trial, despite the evidence and the odds. I'm still amazed at so many lawyers who say they're trial lawyers, yet they never go to trial, nor do they win. There are problems that Sam Bankman-Fried is facing because of his inability to recognize the facts and the truth as it relates to his case. Now, his co-defendants, I can assure you, because I've been in this white-collar crime space since 2008, his co-defendants wake up every morning and they probably do a prayer that says, "Sam, please continue to go to trial. We love you. You're so awesome that you're going to go to trial. We love things that your lawyer is saying in the media, like, yes, he was the public face of the company, but he trusted his confidants to run the business and he thought they were doing it lawfully." When the co-defendants read that, they party, they drink, they have a great time, they're grateful, and they want it to continue because they know, Sam Bankman-Fried knows, his co-defendants' quickest ticket to avoiding prison or getting the shorter federal prison sentence is getting this very coveted 5K1 agreement from the United States government. So his co-defendants hope more than anything that he continues to go to trial. I say Elizabeth Holmes and Sam Bankman-Fried are two peas in a pod because they appear to be making the same decisions. Rather than accept responsibility, it's easier to blame and excuse, and they are choosing to not learn from people in the past, like my friend Nate. They are choosing to not learn from others who live with such regret on a daily basis. People walking around this track in federal prison right now, wishing, begging they could do it over, but they can't. And they're letting people convince them they have a chance to prevail. Why? Well, there is some precedent. Go back to the mortgage meltdown of 2008, 9, 10, and 11, when bankers and CEOs were responsible for the crumbling and destruction of our economy. Did any of those CEOs go to prison? Good God, no. Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns now out of business. JP Morgan, they paid billions of dollars in fines, civil fines, but that's toothless. Can't put a corporation in prison. None of those CEOs went to prison. And of course, the CEOs, when they testify in front of Congress or Senate, say, we're not responsible for directly what our hundreds of thousands of employees are doing. We set the tone at the top, but if we have people going rogue, we can't control that, Your Honor. So who do they put in prison? They put the loan officer, a client of ours in Des Moines, Iowa, who was encouraged by her boss to encourage her clients to fabricate a little bit on the loans, what they call liar loans, to get a loan. They can't afford it. The buyer defaults on the loan. It's a short sale. They send the loan officer to prison. I'm not saying she shouldn't be held accountable, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences, but you send the loan officer to federal prison. The CEO gets paid. So my point is, there is precedent to argue that it's the minions, the people running the day-to-day business, who should be held accountable, not the CEO. Elizabeth Holmes made that same argument. She said there are some misrepresentations that take place in business. Puffery is part and parcel to running a business. But I thought, Your Honor, that we hired experts. We hired people that were reliable. If some people chose to go rogue and do the wrong thing, that's on them. That's not us. And that's even articulated in the horrific, disastrous character reference letters that were written on Elizabeth Holmes' behalf. No acceptance of responsibility, nothing, continuing to blame. It's the wrong message. It appears as if Bankman-Fried is going to go down that same path as he inches towards trial, and he may have convinced himself through self-deception or people telling him what he wants to hear that you will prevail because of these reasons. You can't be responsible. Or like my friend Nate, who used to walk around that dusty dirt track with me in federal prison, he may be telling himself, look, I'm 30, 31, whatever. What, am I going to plead guilty to 20 years and serve 17 years in prison? Ain't no chance. I'm going to roll the dice, hope to win. And, if I lose, I'm going to get 50 years. But really, that's no different from 20 years. I'm going to roll the dice. Here's the takeaway from this video. There is a difference. There's absolutely a difference, as I learned from my friend Nate in federal prison. Besides the obvious that he would have been home from prison more quickly, there's the dignity that comes from accepting responsibility. There's dignity that accompanies embracing reality and being able to openly and honestly tell people that I made bad decisions. I need to be held responsible for them, that I want to create a new record. I'm going to document it. I'm going to demonstrate it. And while I know I will never get not everyone back into my corner, I know that I can get some through hard work, not happy talk, with a deliberate plan. There's dignity that follows doing the work. It could also lead to a shorter federal prison sentence. I think it's unfortunate that it seems he's going to be going to trial. I think it's unfortunate that he's putting himself on a path where he would serve an extra 2 or 3 decades in federal prison because of his unwillingness to wake up and look in the mirror and say, I made really bad decisions. I'm already in prison, even though I'm living in my parents' beautiful home. I think about this 24 hours a day, and I want to do better. And this is how I'm going to do better, not by blaming and excusing, but by owning it. I suspect Elizabeth Holmes will walk around that dusty dirt track in the federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas, after 3 or 4 years passes, which is when she would have been home had she pled guilty. And like my friend Nate, every day past the 4 days, she'll tell herself, had I done the right thing, I'd be home. Had I done the right thing, I'd be with my family. Had I done the right thing, I'd be on the other side of this. Instead, I'm going to endure another 7 years because of my unwillingness to embrace reality and because of my mistaken presumption that I knew everything and I could not be taught. Sam Bankman-Fried, if you're watching this is hard on those that love and support you, your parents. I know it was devastating when my parents had to go through this, and I know it was easier for them when I said I did it, I accept responsibility. It's part of the reason. I didn't cooperate. I didn't have a chance. But it's part of the reason I was sentenced to an measly 18 months in federal prison. You're looking at a much longer sentence, I know. I know if you plead guilty, it could be 10 or 20 years. But as my friend Nate used to say to me, 10 or 20 years is not 40 or 50 years. Do the right thing. Accept responsibility. Create a path to make amends. Learn from Elizabeth Holmes. Learn from my friend Nate, with whom I used to walk the track. Make better, principled decisions. And if you can do that, you'll be home. You'll be home a little quicker than you think, even though 20 years in prison seems unfathomable at this point. Thank you very much for watching.